what is your "this person has no idea how the real world works" moment? At a national park, the park ranger says, "Stay on the trails, there are bears in the area." One lady says, "Isn't that dangerous? Why aren't they in their cages?" Ma'am, we're not a zoo. Well, if you're ready to feel better about yourself, we're about to hear about some pretty clueless people. The other day, my 18-year-old brother-in-law got married to his high school sweetheart in a parking garage so that they can live off campus at college together. The girlfriend's, now wife's, mother is an ordained minister. His parents, my in-laws, were very upset, and he couldn't understand why, because it's just a fake marriage for school. "Oh no, sweet boy, you are married." I just laughed and laughed. I love him dearly, but he's so dumb. I know, it's totally a normal thing. Just hook up with somebody, go get married for a few weeks, and then just break up after that. It's all good. Two things immediately come to mind. First, being a young girl, I used to work with at Target. She was hired for the same 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. shift, but she regularly showed up between 8 or 9 without any good explanation. After the third time or so, our supervisor asked if she had something to do in the morning, such as getting kids ready for school that required a later shift. If so, she could be moved to the 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. shift. The girl's response was, "No, I still want to leave at 2:30, I just don't want to get up that early." She was fired when she refused to acknowledge that you cannot make your own schedule. Second is one of my roommates, a 23-year-old who was quite literally unable to take care of herself in any capacity beyond ordering fast food. I once heard her yell at her mother because she was filling out a job application and got stuck on a section. Her mom was trying to help her finish, but she got frustrated and screamed, "Can't you just fill it out? I want to go play my games." Before you ask, no, there are no disabilities. She's just lazy, spoiled, and incredibly stupid. So what's going to happen if she actually gets the job that her mom filled out the application for? She's going to be like, "I don't want to go to work, Mom, you go for me." My boss told me about a friend of his who told him of a life hack. She would get her bills in the mail, not pay them, and then wait a couple of months to pay. Then she would cry so the debt collectors would feel bad and waive the fees for not paying on time. That was her brilliant life hack. Oh geez, yeah, I'm sure that's really going to work for everybody. You know that people like this are part of the reason why you have to pay more for a lot of things? When I was in boot camp, some kid put his letter addressed to Mom with no address attached. I bet the post office saw that envelope and were just like, "Yeah, just put it in the pile of North Pole letters." A student working part-time at a laboratory at a university came into my office and asked, "So what all can I eat in the refrigerator? I didn't know I was supposed to bring my own lunch." I looked at him, stunned, and replied, "Nothing. That food is for people who brought their own lunch. But you can use my Grubhub to order." He did not understand. It took 4 tries to get him to realize he can't just eat someone else's lunch. Same student, I walked into the lab room and told him I made a full pot of coffee in the office, and he could help himself. He says, "A pot of coffee? What's that?" He never used a coffee maker other than a Keurig before and didn't even know it was a thing. He was fired a month later for stealing chloroform. Well, as somebody who's never drank coffee at all, I can safely say that I'm pretty clueless about all of the coffee terminology. This 18-year-old dude in boot camp got a letter from home, and I can see he's agitated. So being 22 and concerned for his well-being, I asked him if he wanted to talk about it. I'm thinking a Dear John letter or a mom and dad divorce letter. This dude told me that his younger brother got a Mercedes for his birthday, and that he was pissed because he only got a BMW. I can't remember what I said, but I knew boot camp was gonna knock his dick in the dirt. It did. I don't usually take spoiled rich kids as being the type to join the military. Listening to a faulty new car story when it turned out that the 42-year-old woman was driving for 7 months with the handbrake on the whole time. Yeah, that'll cause some problems with your car. But I mean, it's kind of weird. Why do cars just still drive with the handbrake on? Like, I've actually made that mistake once or twice too, where you start driving and you're like, oops, that's not good. So I mean, it's weird that you can do that at all. So my dad, he used to be a typical boomer, always thinking I was just being lazy and not doing things right. Until he got injured, and he could no longer work in an industry he had 30 plus years of experience and seniority in. It took him several months to get a new job of any kind, and was shocked when he realized that he couldn't just negotiate for higher pay. He was fired on the spot when they threatened to organize a strike, and was barred from the premises. When he had to move, it baffled him that he couldn't just give the landlord a few $100 and move in right away, but had to wait a week for his application to go through, and the landlord to do a background check. Probably my most satisfying one was when he finally decided to get into the industry I'm in, truck driving. He learned very fast that it wasn't like it is in the movies from the 80s. Truckers don't now, nor ever have cared about one another. Sure, some are nice to one another, but if it's a choice of you or them, don't hold your breath. Most big trucking companies in the US do not give a crap about you, or your family, and they're only concerned about your safety because it saves them money on lawsuits. After his third trucking job ended with him getting terminated, and is now living off of my income, he stopped giving me crap about my problems, and is still job hunting. You know, a lot of this story just kind of makes me wish that I lived back in, like, the 80s or something. Back when there was still some wiggle room in life and that everything wasn't so cracked down and regulated. They did a study, and there's a lot of people who have winning lottery as part of their retirement plan. Well, as long as you want it enough, just keep dreaming, it'll work out for you one day. A first-year college student of mine thought the assignment deadlines were guidelines. Nothing was handed in on time. She emailed me the night before her final exam to see if I'd take some of her late work. I told her no. She threatened to report me. I let her. She failed, got reprimanded, and was eventually expelled due to plagiarism. You know, I'm thinking, like, how does somebody make it all the way to college without ever turning assignments in on time? But then I remember how the high school standards just keep getting lower and lower every year. It's like free money in response to any kind of financing or borrowing. For car financing, student loans, credit cards, home equity line of credit. See, I don't really understand how anyone sees, like, credit cards or loans as, like, free money. Like, I have never been able to see it that way. It's kind of like, let's say you have a bunch of money that you always spend, that always is in your right pocket. But then one day you have some money in your left pocket, and you spend that money, and you thought, wow, it must have been free because it didn't come out of my right pocket. My son was 3 days away from when his credit card bill was due, and needed to borrow money, which was fine. He expressed his relief that I gave him the loan, saying, I was afraid they'd cut off the card and not let me buy groceries this week if I didn't pay the balance. In other words, he's never let the balance roll over, just as I taught him, but he has no clue that he can actually let the balance roll over or pay a portion of the bill, and he'll be charged the rate plus a fee. I think I'm not going to tell him about that part. Okay, so this one's kind of the opposite of that last one, but I mean, I can almost relate to this one because I'm always just like, I don't even know what happens if you don't pay off your credit card right away because I've always just paid it off like immediately after using it. That's why I've always been like, what's the point of this? My brother is 26 years old and has only had one job. He worked there for like 2 months. Our cousin helped him get hired. It was the easiest job in the world. A team of people drilled wells for agriculture, and my brother would come at night and watch the equipment. He had a new RV to sleep in. They let him watch TV, bring his dog, smoke, drink, eat whatever he wanted. The only thing he had to do was be there. He wanted to go to dinner with his girlfriend and asked for the day off. His boss told him no because he was the only person they had to stay there at night. He told his boss to F off and quit on the spot. To this day, he doesn't work, pay bills, or do anything with his life. He smokes weed and plays old video games. Sad waste of a life, in my opinion. See, there's some people's problem. When you have the easiest job in the world, just appreciate it. I've been in this situation before where I'm just like, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. But at the same time, it does cause you to become a lot more lazy and it's a lot harder to get back into real work afterwards. My mom was spontaneously in the city I live in and asked me to meet her for supper. I told her I was on the bus and it would take me 45 minutes to get to her, even though in a car it would be a 15-minute drive. She said, just tell the bus driver to bring you here now. She has no concept of how public transportation works. Yeah, the bus driver's just like, hey, we're going to be making a side stop. Anyone need to go anywhere? I worked with a girl in her 20s who had her first ever official paycheck. She was beaming with excitement as she opened the envelope. Smile drops and she says, wait, what are these lines? She had no idea what taxes were. We are taxed to work, to simply live somewhere, to buy things, to sell things, to flush things. Welcome to poverty, young girl in a low-paying career. Yeah, I mean, it really doesn't take long for a lot of people once they start working to realize that taxes are kind of a big scam. One year for Christmas, I custom made a board game for my girlfriend where the theme was about her going on as many holidays as possible. The entire thing was full of references to her friends and family with a bunch of in-jokes. Several people said I should just mass-produce it and sell it. It's like, who the heck do you think is going to buy a game themed about some random person they've never heard of? Well, if he tries it and it works out, maybe I'll just try starting a business to sell my own family pictures. When my roommate, who never once paid for rent or groceries or anything, turned down the only job offer they'd ever gotten in front of me twice. They were so desperate they called him twice, offering good pay during COVID, and he had the gall to say no in front of me. His excuse was, nah, I'm sure there's something better. $20 an hour is garbage in this city. So why do you continue to let him live with you then? Old roommate was only paying $25 on her credit cards every month, but was putting almost every purchase on them. I felt so bad explaining to her that she was now in credit card debt. I mean, how long does it take to just run into your debt limit if you're never paying it off, though? Like, surely you're gonna figure out something is wrong sooner or later. After listening to my father rail against some fake political moral panic, I realized that he was incensed by something that happened on the show he watched the previous night, and not something that happened in reality. I realized then, I was 10 at the time, he was 40, that he couldn't tell the difference between fiction and nonfiction. He believed that it was illegal to say or show untrue things on television. In all the years that followed, he never learned better, though. Once the internet came around, he insisted that that was all fraudulent. So much so that if a news program had the same story both on television and online, the very existence of the online story made the television story untrue, and was violating the law, since it was illegal to say or show untrue things on television. In addition to this, I learned that he was functionally illiterate. You know, out of all the responses in this video, this one explains the most, just based on how much psychosis and blind trust and differing narratives around the internet just get spread around. Like, nobody even knows what to believe on the internet anymore. My cousin is 47, and a couple years ago, a relative died and left him $10K. He'd always lived with my grandma and had a structured settlement of $400 a month from an accident he was in as a teenager. Into heavy drugs, never employed, bummed around living like a kid with no allowance. He told me that he wanted to get a car, an apartment, and then wanted my advice on how to invest the rest of the $10K. Come on, man. Well, if he only buys a toy car and a cardboard box to live in, he might have some left over to invest. What do you mean there's a global bike shortage? Can't you just order more? What do you mean that bike won't ship until August? Can't you just bump up the shipment date? No, we cannot just order more. We can't just bump up the shipment date. If we could, we would. Coming from a fed-up bike shop employee. You know, there's an alarming amount of people out there right now who think that shortages aren't real, and that everything that's in stores is just magically going to appear there forever. But I think a lot of people are going to be getting a very rude awakening soon. Mine is a coworker. He believes that anytime his ex does something with their daughter and he doesn't agree with it, he needs to call the cops. Ex has daughter sharing a room with older sister, time to call the cops. He calls late at night and the kid is sleeping, and ex won't wake her up, time to call the cops. And caseworkers. Ex's current husband won't give the computer his pay stubs, time to call the caseworker. Dude has cops and his caseworkers on speed dial. The dude doesn't understand why cops and his caseworker keep telling him that since the child is not abused and or neglected, and his ex is doing everything the court has told her that she needs to do, there is nothing illegal happening. The dude is still trying to find ways to control the ex and what goes on in her house. You gotta love that anyone can just dial 911 and command a fleet of police to just go anywhere, and can just keep abusing that and doing it over and over. Like, aren't you supposed to get in trouble or get fined for doing that kind of thing? Me, I was 18 and living in my first apartment. I spent 15 minutes looking for a button on the trash chute. Didn't realize until the third time that I just needed to throw the trash down. I had lived with my parents until then, and they failed to teach me a lot of basic life necessities. Love them, but man was I stupid. I guess that as parents you kind of just assume that your kid knows a lot of very basic things, just a lot of things you wouldn't even think to bring up. In my very middle-class college, there was a girl who had never had a single paying job because her parents wouldn't let her. They wanted her to really focus on her studies so that she could get a good job after school. Oh friends, she was studying fine arts bookbinding. What bookbinding job are you getting right out of college in 2010 with no work experience that's gonna pay all your bills? See, that's what's so weird, is that just like having a job, especially young and getting a lot of experience, is often more valuable than spending a few years at college. And your money will go up in the process instead of down. I had a 25-year-old ask me how to peel a banana a few years ago. Well, I hope you handed him a can opener and see him try to figure it out. Anyways, that's all of the most clueless things people have said. You know, I've said this a few times, but it's kind of impractical to assume that every single person knows every amount of basic information. But I mean, growing up, like, no matter how easy your life is, you still have to learn thousands of things, and so it's perfectly reasonable that one of those little things may have slipped through the cracks for some people. So I usually don't fault people too much for some things, but if it's something that's going to completely ruin your life, then you might want to be more careful.